Welcome back to DSR. And we are still covering the Psion update Unearthed Arcana. And we're going to go over the subclasses now. Starting with the Metamorph, I'm going to do one video per subclass because there's just too much to cover. And I don't want to skimp on the analysis. And I'll just crank these videos out, do one or two a day. And so they each won't be so long. So you can just focus on the one you're interested in. First up, and this is going to be relevant, I went ahead and scored the Psion kind of overall um, without doing a deep analysis and crunching the numbers. But this is looking at the class. This is how I would rank the Psion base class. And this is my concern with the Psion base class. Of course, it's not a good martial character. They do have some ability to do range damage. They kind of have an interesting niche with range damage in that they don't have any very good blast spells, but with their one psionic discipline called Destructive Thoughts, they can increase the damage to one creature of their range spell. So they could do, if you take that one, a little more damage. I'm not sure it ranks them up to a B as a range damage dealer, being single target. Maybe. I'd have to crunch the numbers, but for now I'm going to give them a C. They're a C blaster as well. They just don't have the spells to support either of those roles. And a controller, wow, they are the best controller. They have control spells all over their spell list. They have the best control spells, both the control spells that take concentration and the ones that don't take concentration. And on top of that, they have id insinuation, their psionic discipline, that allows them to reduce the saving throw of one of the targets of their enchantment spells, which are the majority of their control spells. So they are a better enchanter than the enchanter subclass. Oh, and on top of that, they have subtle spell for all their Psion spells, right? Which also makes them good at being a face, or at least allows them to cast their spells in social situations without tipping off the people they're talking to that they're casting these spells. So that helps them be a face of the party. Now, they don't have any of the skills, probably not the charisma ability score to support them being a face, but at least they're better at with the spells at being the face. And then they've got a few, like a smattering of support spells. So the Psion is an interesting class, and I think its focus is way too narrow because there will be a number of combats where you just don't need to repeatedly control creatures. Like you cast maybe one control spell, maybe it's an easy fight. You cast one control spell you're concentrating on, and it just doesn't make sense to keep casting more non-concentration control spells. So what do you do in the rest of the fight? Just plinking away with cantrips? I think they need to adjust things just a little bit with the base class. Just a high level bit on the subclasses and the design notes. First up is I want to call it the design note that the Psywarper subclass from the previous Unearthed Arcana apparently scored so well they're not reprinting it, they're not redoing it, and they're just going to take that one. They're already good to go with that, which makes sense. That was, I agree, the best one from the previous Unearthed Arcana. Let's get into the Metamorph. So the Metamorph, the whole concept is psychically sculpt life and flesh. So you are not only transforming your own body, but you're also better at transforming other people's bodies, regenerating their bodies, draining their life. Very cool thematically, very cool flavor-wise. And I like it. And this is a concept that was in the second edition Psionics as well. So I like that they brought it back and that they're continuing it. All right, we're going to compare May to October, the two different versions of the Psion Unearthed Arcana. Now, the spell list didn't change at all, so there's nothing to call out there. But what I do want to call out is they put Alter Self on here, and it makes sense thematically, but Alter Self is a super garbage spell. Like, it's terrible, terrible, terrible. Like, the base spell is terrible. Even if you gave it all of the features from the Transmuter Wizard Unearthed Arcana and took concentration off, it's still maybe a C-rated spell. It's not good. And on top of that, it just doesn't make sense with the Metamorph. The Metamorph is already going to get a swimming speed, which is one of the only compelling reasons to use this spell. It's just terrible. So they either need to, I think maybe the first thing that WotC should consider, they should errata this spell and make it way better. Just because they've put it on a number of classes spell lists, and it's just garbage. I mean, it's so bad, it would be better to just leave an empty spot on their spell list, because that way players who are less familiar with these classes and this spell would not fall into the trap of thinking that sounds cool and then casting it only to be super disappointed, wasting turns in combat, and feeling let down, right? Even the weapons from Alter Self, right? You already make your own weapons. You've got organic weapons. You would just never use this spell. It makes no sense. Next up is Inflict Wounds. Again, thematically makes sense. You've got this control over life. You're healing things, giving life energy to some, your allies, and then you're taking life energy from others, with Inflict Wounds, dealing necrotic damage. However, they have built this subclass to be a martial character, which means you should always use, almost all the time, not always, most of the time, you should be using your action to attack. You're going to be much better at it. You will always do more damage with attacking with your action than you will with inflict wounds. It just never makes sense. So again, take it off the spell list, give them something that actually makes sense. And I would propose replace this with healing word, right? Just lean into this theme of being a healer. You might as well give it to them. And they took away the bonus action for cure wounds, so give them healing word. And finally, Contagion. Now, this is not a terrible spell anymore. They really improved the spell, but it's still an action to cast, and it's a damaging spell and a debuff. So it's not the worst fit, and if they leave it, that's okay. But if they put so many healing type spells on their spell list, that we might as well lean into making this a decent healer subclass. And to be a decent healer, you really need Greater Restoration and probably Revivify. Although I'd rather have Aura, Vitality, and Haste. So I would swap out Contagion for Greater Restoration. Yeah, you're not going to cast it all the time. That's okay. Let it sit on your spell list. The time you need it, you've got it to help out. So those 3 spells I would swap. All right, moving into your next feature at level 3. They changed the name from Extended Limbs to Mutable Form. I prefer the name change, so great. And they modified it. Other than this one box, it completely works the same. So this one thing they changed is that when you expend that psionic energy die, you get to roll it and gain that many temporary hit points, plus your intelligence modifier, which was desperately needed, right? This was you're trying to turn a full caster equivalent of a wizard into a martial, right? No armor training, no shield training, D6 hit die, no boost to your AC. All right, they desperately need something to shore that up. So temporary hit points, great. They really needed that. And that's not enough on its own, but it gave them some other things to make them a pretty good martial. All right, next up is organic weapons. And they did modify this slightly. They changed it so that instead of whenever you take the attack action, you temporarily create turn one of your hands into a weapon, and then it immediately disappears, which was a problem, right? That was problematic. Like you couldn't use it with other reactions like defensive duelist when you needed it. Now they did say you could use it with an opportunity attack, so you could make opportunity attacks with it, but there are other reactions you need a weapon for. Like the protection fighting style, the interception fighting style. Now you don't have access to those, but maybe you multi-class, right? If this weapon is going to be the main weapon you're going to use, it's got to address all the scenarios in which you need a weapon. So they fixed that in that it's indefinite now, unless you decide to revert your limb. But they also made it take a magic action to turn one hand into one of these weapons. Now, it doesn't say that you can't turn both of your hands. You could, as 2 separate magic items, turn one hand into one weapon, turn your other hand into another weapon, and leave them indefinitely. But now you have no hands to be, doing other things with. And you do need, with your psionic casting, you don't need the verbal and material components are removed, but the somatic components are not removed. So if the spell has a somatic component, you do need a hand that is not a weapon to be able to cast that spell. So I think, I get this, but it's still, and it's definitely better, right? That's definitely better. It would be even better if they just, instead of making it take a magic item to transform one of your hands into a weapon or one of your limbs into a weapon, they should make it be the equivalent of a draw or stow action, right? Which is the same thing that every other martial can do. With a draw or stow, which could be done before and after every attack and the attack action, plus one's free in a round, they could be swapping out weapons and leveraging different weapon mastery properties, different weapon properties, different damage types, things like that. Why not let this Metamorph do the same thing? I think that they need that, and it would make a lot more sense. Then you could be doing these interesting things without having to worry about, well, my hands are both weapons, and now I can't cast spells. and I don't need a magic action to start it up. I think they need to make that change. And yeah, like I mentioned, it lasts indefinitely, which is a big improvement. So that's good. And you can untransform it as soon as you need it. So I guess if both your hands were weapons and you suddenly needed a hand to cast a spell, you could untransform one of them, but it would take a magic action to put it back. And you don't want to be doing that in the middle of combat. So yeah. And here are the 3 weapons. Again, no change at all, but they are pretty cool. They work well, I think, and they gave them like interesting properties. Like the Bone Blade basically has pack tactics when you attack with it. Um, the Flesh Maul has an interesting kind of debuff that it applies, where they have disadvantage on their next Strength or Constitution saving throw. You don't see that a lot. Now you can't benefit from it yourself, or I can't see any way to benefit from it yourself because you don't have any weapon mastery properties, and you can't put them on your organic weapons. And this debuff ends at the start of at the start of the target's next turn. So the only way that you could benefit, you can't benefit from it. You'd have to apply this and then plan ahead with an ally who has spells or abilities that rely on Constitution and Strength saving throws. Like Topple is a good one, right? Topple is a Constitution saving throw. So if you have another martial, you run up, hit them with this right before their turn, and then they're going to use Topple on theirs, and they're going to have, and then the target's going to have disadvantage on their Constitution saving throws, so you have a higher chance to topple. Like you're going to have to coordinate with your other team members to make use of this, which I think is fine because I like things that encourage teamwork, encourage players to interact and engage with each other during combat and outside of combat. So I'm just fine with that. I think it's great. Viscera Launcher is interesting. It's a ranged weapon. Range isn't super great, and it does acid damage, which is the only option. But acid is rarely resisted, so that's probably okay. And like I said before, you could have one hand be the Visceral Launcher and your other hand be a Bone Blade. And as long as you don't have spells with somatic components, that doesn't hold you up at all. You can just, doesn't matter if you're stuck in melee. You can stab with your Bone Blade, and if you're not in melee, you can fire off your Visceral Launcher. So this all overall works pretty well now. So if they don't change anything, I give it a thumbs up. It would just be a little bit better if they made that change to creating your organic weapons. Level 6, extra attack. They didn't change it, and this is essentially like the Blade Singer version where you can replace one with a cantrip. Now, you don't have access to most of the Blade cantrips on your Scion list. You only have 2 attack cantrips. One is Mind Sliver, which maybe you want to use that. Combine it with like your Maul organic weapon attack, so they have disadvantage on their Strength and Constitution saving throw, and a -1d4, which would be interesting. And then you have True Strike, right? Which is the one that you definitely want to get, right? You are a martial, and you want to leverage this to boost your damage as much as you can. And True Strike's definitely one you want to have. So combine that. That would be your basic attack: is 1 True Strike, 1 regular attack with your organic weapons. Sometimes you might use Mind Sliver. Maybe there's some scenarios which you'd use a different cantrip. Most of the time, I would say 99, vast majority of the time, you're going to want to use True Strike. Also at level 6, they took this ability that was in the May Unearthed Arcana called Quickened Healing, which was garbage. Expending 2 Psionic Energy dice of the total of 6 that you would have at this level, just add 1 Psionic Energy die to the healing you do with Cure Wounds, and you could roll a 1. So you blew 2 of your 6 Psionic Energy dice and rolled a 1, because you only get to roll 1 Psionic Energy die and add it to the healing, and you did all that for 1 point of healing. It was garbage. Even the changing Cure Wounds into a bonus action wasn't enough to make this worthwhile. So they changed it to Flesh Weaver, which is better. And first off, it's more of, so this is an enhancement to your Mutable Forms ability. So when you initiate Mutable Forms, you can spend another Psionic Energy dice. So now we're talking 2, because it takes 1 normally. This is an additional one. So you're going to spend 2 Psionic Energy dice to gain the following benefits. You get +2 to your AC, which is desperately needed. You're a martial with like terrible AC. Fortunately, they gave you the shield spell, so it's not nearly as bad as it was, but you still have a relatively low AC. You're a skirmisher, to be clear. You should not be standing on the front line. You should not be plan to stay in melee. You're a skirmisher. You want to run in, attack, and get out. And then you have this feature card called Empowered Healing. This is better. It applies to any healing spell now, not just Cure Wounds. They took away the bonus action improvement. and it only expends one psionic energy die to add that healing. Now you still have to enhance your mutable form to do this. So you're spending one to turn on mutable form. That lasts one to enhance mutable form. That lasts 1 minute. But during that 1 minute, now you just spend one more to empower healing. So I'd say that's better overall. But you're still a martial, which means most of the time you should be attacking with your action. And so, how often are you going to want to spend your action to cast Cure Wounds with this instead? You'd have to be super desperate. And just adding one more psionic energy die at level 6 is a D8. So you're going to add one more D8 to your Cure Wounds, which is not even the same as upcasting at one level. Upcasting Cure Wounds one level would increase it by 2D8. You're only adding 1D8 to this thing. And again, you might roll a 1. And your psionic energy dice are a very important commodity, right? You do want to be doing the enhancement for that AC bonus every time. So you only have 6 psionic energy die at this level, and every time you start combat, you're going to need to expend 2. So if you have 3 combats in a day, you need all 6 of those just to do your basic fight, to be in your basic fighting form. Now you do get 1 psionic energy die back when you take a short rest, and you're going to need it, but it's not quite enough, and I think empowered healing is still too weak. I think they need to add an additional, when you expend that additional psionic energy die to do empowered healing, you should add your intelligence modifier, which means it's probably going to be added again because most healing spells, add your intelligence or your spellcasting modifier. And I think they need to make it, a bonus action for Cure Wounds and Mass Cure Wounds. They do those 2 things, then I think this is a solid ability. Without that, I think the empowered healing is probably a waste. Probably doesn't make sense at all. Level 10. All right. In the May version, it was called Mutable Form. In the October version, your 3rd level ability is called Mutable Form. So now it's called Improved Mutable Form. And other than the name references, it's exactly the same. Except right there in Unnatural Flexibility, they reduced it from a +2 bonus to AC to a +1 bonus to AC. Presumably that's because of the level 6 ability, the improvement to Mutable Form, which gives you a +2 AC now. That's fine. I think it wouldn't have been too powerful at all. It probably would have been just good enough to leave it as another +2, because your AC, like, you're trying to be a martial and your AC is still not good enough and your hit points are quite low. I think they should have left it. So that's the only other change. And level 14. In the May version, and in both versions, it's called Life Bending Weapons. In the May version, all it was once per turn, you could decide to expend a psionic energy die and kind of heal whoever you wanted within 10 feet. And when you did that, you could deal necrotic damage to one creature within the area, within that 10-foot emanation, equal to the roll on the psionic energy die. So you're talking at this level, you're level 14, that'd be a 1d10. So you would heal, a number of allies, as many as that are in that area, by 1d10 hit points. So you could roll a 1 again, and you would deal damage to one creature equal to that roll. So you might expend an energy die, heal 2 or 3 allies by 1, and then deal 1 damage to an enemy. That was garbage. That was a super underwhelming subclass capstone. And so they've really improved it in October, which is great. Okay. So first up, your weapons become wreathed in negative energy and you radiate life-mending psionic energy. When you hit a target with an attack roll using your organic weapon, roll 1 psionic energy die. The target takes extra necrotic damage equal to the number rolled. This roll does not expend a die. So now it's every time you hit, whether it's your turn, whether it's a reaction, whether it's you're using extra attack and making 2 attacks, every time you hit with one of your organic weapons, you're dealing an extra necrotic damage equal to your psionic energy die. So it's 1d10 on top of every one of your hits. That is fantastic. This is a huge improvement and desperately needed. Whenever you're a martial, you do need to have ways to scale your damage beyond level 6. So they need a damage boost. It's maybe a little bit too late. Like, this would have been better at level 10, because a lot of your other martials are getting a damage with their weapons, a big damage scale upgrade at level 10, 11, and you didn't get anything. So this is maybe a little too late, but it's still a vast improvement. And then there's the second portion, which is kind of equivalent to what the May version was, but they still made it better. And they make it sound like instead of dealing this damage, you're going to heal. but it actually still does the damage. So alternatively, when you hit a creature with your organic weapon, you can instead expend 1 psionic energy die and roll it. The target takes extra necrotic damage equal to the roll, so you still do the damage, and each creature of your choice within a 30-foot emanation, so a much bigger area, originating from you regains hit points equal to the number rolled plus your intelligence modifier. So even if you roll a 1, they're going to get 1 plus your intelligence modifier, which should be a 5 by now. It should definitely be a 5. And you can only use that healing feature once per turn, once per round, because you can only do it. You can't do it again before the start of your next turn. So you can only do it once per round. But they boosted the healing, which is great, and you always do the damage on every hit, even the healing hit. So this whole thing is much better. Like I said, would have liked to see it a little sooner, but if they print it like this, I'm okay with it. Let's break it down and compare some things here, right? Compare it to the base class. So these are the ranks I would give the base class across all the roles. And the Metamorph, I give them a C as a frontliner. Their offensive capability really improved. They really don't have the defensive capabilities, even though they got the temporary hit points and you got the shield spell and a few other things. It's better. I'm not sure I would give it a B. Not enough to be a B. But as a skirmisher, this is a solid A. And they did a good job. It comes online right at level 3 with your mutable form and organic weapons. And mutable form is critical. It gives you that reach, and you need that to be a good skirmisher, right? You're built as a glass cannon, so you can't stay in melee, or you're going to get clobbered, right? You don't have the AC, you don't have the hit points to take it. So you need to run in, attack, and then get out. So having that reach lets you do that. You can run up, stay at 10 feet away, make your attacks, get out of there, and you're not going to provoke an opportunity attack unless the monster also has reach. But most of the time, you can tell if the monster has reach. Either they're going to be like a giant or large size, or they have like tentacles, things like that. But even if you guess wrong and they do have reach, and then you try to run away and provoke an opportunity attack, in those cases, you've got your shield spell to protect yourself. You just won't need shield spell every single combat, every single time, because you're a skirmisher, right? So that reach is really doing a lot of work for you. Then you got your organic weapons that you can use with your intelligence modifier to attack for the attack roll and damage. And those weapons are pretty good. So those two things together, starting right at 3rd level, you're a solid skirmisher. And then they just keep adding on top of that, which is great. I like the design. I like the theme. You can also be a solid ranged attacker, right? With that viscera launcher. Yeah, viscera launcher. So you're a pretty good ranged attacker. It scales up with your life-bending weapons, and it scales up with later levels. So you do a good job of continuing to scale that. So you can be an effective ranged attacker or skirmisher. You can actually switch back and forth between the two. Being a blaster, they didn't give you anything here to be a better blaster. That's fine. You're still a solid controller. Again, you only get the S tier ranking for controller if you take id insinuation as one of your psionic disciplines. But if you want to be an A tier skirmisher and range attacker, you don't have room for that until later levels. I think level 10 is when you'd have enough to get the 4th one. And I'll cover that in a sec. A B rated healer, you're kind of half of a healer. You've got lots of spell slots. You don't have all the right spells you need to truly be a good healer. But you're a solid like backup healer. Not quite a full backup healer, because to really be a backup healer, you need some kind of res. Because what if the main healer dies? Backup healer, it's important for them to have a res spell to bring them back, and you have nothing. So maybe B- as a healer. But they have several important support spells, so they could be a B-rated support, including like haste. Although, frankly, when you're high enough level to cast haste, you should most of the time be casting that on yourself. Boost your AC, give yourself another attack, and double your speed, which is going to be great for a skirmisher. So most of the time, you just want to cast on yourself. But if you want to be a support caster, the Metamorph can be a decent healer support caster. Now here's the gotcha, and I don't love when the design of a subclass or a class has these kind of gotchas. And the gotchas is, in order to get these kind of ratings and be solid in these kind of ways, you have to do certain things. So first off, there are certain spells you have to take. These are not put on your spell list on your subclass spell list. They're on your base class spell list, but you have to choose them. And you can only swap one spell per level gained. So make sure you get True Strike at cantrip as one of your cantrips. Take Shield as one of your 1st level spells, and take Ectoplasmic Trail as one of your 2nd level spells. You need all 3 of those. True Strike's needed for the additional damage. Shield is needed to protect yourself whenever you get, somebody managed to hit you, you get stuck in melee. or they manage to they've got reach and they get an opportunity of attack on you. Ectoplasmic Trail is your get out of jail free card, right? That's you're stuck in melee, you're surrounded by enemies, and you're in a lot of trouble, right? If you try to run away, you're going to provoke too many opportunity attacks. You're likely to get hit by a number of them, get in trouble. Ectoplasmic Trail, you cast that as a bonus action. It boosts your speed, and you don't provoke opportunity attacks when you move, and you can move through enemies. So you can just like start moving away. That's your escape spell. You don't have Misty Step. You don't have any other escape spells like Zephyr Strike, which would actually be pretty good on this character. Or what is it, Kinetic Jaunt? You don't have that either. So that's your escape spell. So get those 3 spells, and then for your psionic disciplines, first get biofeedback. You need that to keep boosting your temporary hit points. You need those temporary hit points to keep yourself from getting just crushed in melee. And then you want inerrant aim, which boosts your ability to hit. Get those 2 first, and then your third psionic discipline, get bolstering precognition, which you would get at 5th level. So get those 3 first, and then you get all these ratings. You're an A-rated skirmisher, you're an A-rated ranged attacker. You wouldn't be quite yet the S controller, but that's not your main thing you're here for, right? You're a skirmisher. You're a B-rated healer. You're a B-rated support. You're a solid contributor to the party. You're going to have a lot of fun. You're going to do a lot of damage, and you're not going to like break easily. If you get hit a few times, you've got some temporary hit points to absorb that. You're going to do well, and this will be fun. So, without reservation, thumbs up on this one. They did a great job. There's a few things to tweak, primarily those 3 spells on your spell list that just don't make any sense, and then the organic weapons tweak so that you can create the organic weapons with a draw stow action. Those would make this subclass like perfect. It would just be awesome. Without those, it's still very, very solid and great. So an unreserved thumbs up. I love it, and I'm excited to play this. I can't wait for them to print this in a book.